Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'll be showing my pose drawing process. I'll also be giving some tips for drawing poses. I actually don't have that many videos about drawing poses on my channel, and that's because I've never been very confident in my pose drawing abilities. Drawing poses is really tricky, and I'm still learning how to draw the human body in many different poses. Many people have been asking me for help when it comes to drawing poses, so I thought maybe it would be helpful to show my pose drawing process and also give some tips. I'll be working digitally today, but all these tips also apply for traditional drawing. Also, I am using references while drawing these poses for this video. If you have a hard time drawing poses, I highly recommend learning from life and pose references. They are very helpful. Anyways, let's get started. This first pose I'm drawing is a pretty basic standing pose. She is kind of sticking out her hip and extending the other leg. She's also tilting her head and shoulders. When the head tilts to one side, the shoulder on that side tends to go up a little bit, so I try to keep that in mind. Her line of action seems to kind of be going like this. I'm still kind of trying to learn about the line of action and how to find them. I think of it as the way the body flows. A lot of times I kind of just draw the line in the torso if it's a more stationary pose, a little bit like this one, but if it's a pose with a lot of movement, I try to think about how the line is traveling through the whole body. I actually don't have a ton to say about this first pose because I'm not super pleased with how it turned out. I mean, it's okay, but I feel like it could be better. It was the first thing I drew that day when I was recording this. A lot of times I need to let myself warm up and get into the drawing groove. The first things I draw for the day often look kind of meh, and drawing can feel a little difficult, but after a little bit I start to warm up and things start to feel easier and a little bit more natural. So don't be too hard on yourself if you sit down and the first thing you draw for the day isn't very good. Give yourself a little bit of time to warm up. When sketching poses, I try to start very loose. It can be easy to get fixated on details when drawing poses before we even get the general shape of the body in place. Focusing too much on the details before fleshing out the pose can make things feel stiffer and also a little bit out of proportion. When I'm drawing poses to make them look proportionate, I'm doing a lot of comparing between the different parts of the body. So if I only draw one part of the body in super detail and then move on to another part, things can sometimes end up kind of wonky. If you have a hard time being loose and quick and tend to overthink things a little bit, something that can really help is gesture drawings with a timer. I found this really helps me to be loose. I'll give myself a short amount of time and then try to get a rough sketch of that pose within that amount of time. You can make the time as quick as you want, maybe try out different times to see what works best for you. You don't want it to be so fast that you can't get much of anything on the paper, but you also don't want it to be too long that you end up focusing on the details. Now I'm going to start cleaning up the pose a bit. When I'm doing this traditionally, I usually do my rough sketch in pencil and then I'll clean it up a little bit and then clean up my lines with a pen or a marker. When doing pose studies, I try not to focus too much on the details. Like the hands are kind of just simple shapes, I don't draw the face, and overall everything is kind of loose. I try to focus on things related to the pose and its movement, and things like how the clothes interact with the pose. I do always add the hair even though they're not really related to the body, but that's just because I like to draw the hair and it makes the pose feel a little bit more finished. When drawing bodies, I try to keep these proportion guides in mind. 1, the arms are the same length as the torso and the elbow goes at about the middle point. The legs are the same length as the upper body and the knees go at about the halfway point. I'm actually experimenting with making the legs slightly longer than the upper body. I've noticed many manga and anime characters have legs that are a bit longer than their upper body, so I'm trying that out for myself with my style. So here's the first pose. Now that I'm warmed up a little bit, let's try something a little more complicated. This pose is in a jumping leg position. When drawing poses, I always start with the head. It is my basis for how I measure the body. When sketching the head, I like to get a good idea of where the head is looking. So I'll usually draw a circle and then draw 2 lines across it. One line is the center line to help me know which way the head is facing, and the other line kind of helps me know what perspective the head is in. I don't totally know how to explain it. Another thing I like to do is if the head isn't in front view, I'll draw a circle on the side of the head to show me how much of the side of the head I can see. If you look at the human head, it's kind of flat on the side, and this circle helps me remember that. Now let's get back to the pose. His line of action is very strong and it curves like this all the way down to the leg. After getting the head in place, the second thing I pretty much always do is get the torso in place. A lot of times in how to draw books for poses, they start off with drawing a stick figure with circles for the joints. You can do this if that works for you. I personally prefer to draw the body with shapes. I'm going to try my best to explain this process, but it's something I kind of do instinctively, so it's a little hard to explain exactly what I'm doing. In this case, I start by roughly drawing the rib cage and then adding the trap muscle to connect the neck to the rest of the body. You can't see the trap too much because of the perspective at the moment. I often like to rough in the shape of the rib cage by drawing a roundish shape that goes up in the middle. This helps me get a good idea of the upper torso. For the hips, I often draw an underwear-like shape, I guess. Some people draw a box shape for the hips. I often prefer to draw this shape because it helps me better understand where the legs will be going. I like to think of the ribcage and hips as being solid shapes, like they're hard and they're not very stretchy. And then the area in between is kind of soft and stretchy. Its job is to connect the hips to the ribcage. The torso is important to get in place because it's kind of my base for the rest of the pose. How long I make the arms and legs is measured by how long I make the torso. For the arms, one is going to be touching his head and the other is going downwards and out a bit. When drawing poses, it's good to be able to understand 3D shapes and how they change depending on how we are looking at them. For the arms, I often think of them as cylinders. If we are looking down at a cylinder, the curves curve downwards, and if we are looking up at a cylinder, the curves curve upwards. This is really helpful to keep in mind when drawing clothes on the body. So if the arm is in an up position and we're kind of looking up at the arm, the curves of the clothing on the arm should also be kind of going in an upward curve. I hope that makes sense. Now his legs are a bit tricky. They gave me a little trouble. The right thigh is coming towards us, so there is a bit of foreshortening, and then the lower part of the leg is kind of bending back. One trick I want to share with you when I draw poses that have legs or arms that are bending is triangles. When drawing arms or legs that bend, you often get triangles. So like for his leg, it's forming a triangle that's like this, and the arm is also forming one like this. A lot of times when the arms and legs bend, the wrist can line up with the shoulder, and the ankle kind of lines up with the bottom of the hips or kind of right at the start of the tush. For the feet, I break it up into these 3 shapes. I actually learned this in my Let's Improve at Drawing Feet video, and man, it has helped me so much. If you want to learn with me about drawing feet in that video, I'll put a link to it in the description and up in the corner. So now that my rough sketch is in place, I start cleaning things up. I also start adding the clothing. The clothes can really help convey the form of the body, so it's important to think of how the clothes are interacting with it. Like the folds on his shirt are stretching across the torso because of how the torso is turned. The shirt also kind of helps convey motion because it's flowing up a bit. I also try to keep in mind the wrinkles that form around the joints, especially joints that are bending. I also have a video on clothing folds if you want a more in-depth explanation on them. I talk about different fabrics and the different kinds of folds that can form and how they interact with the body. Lastly, I like to add a little bit of color. I often do this in my sketchbook and stuff. It helps me better see the pose and its form, so I like filling them in a little bit. So now we'll move on to the last pose, but before we do, it's time for a mini review. This mini review is on the PD156PRO. This tablet has a fully laminated 15.6-inch screen, so it has a pretty large working area. With the tablet, we get this big pouch that you can put the tablet in to protect it, a stand. I really like the stand, it's really nice. It can adjust to 3 different heights. We also get things like the glove, the power cords, pen stand, and the pen stand holds extra nibs inside of it. Speaking of the pen, it has 8,192 levels of pressure sensitivity and supports up to 60 degrees of tilt. It also has 2 express buttons on it. This tablet was very simple to set up and it gave me no issues. Also, the tablet has 9 customizable express keys, 1 OSD key, and 1 round key. These all worked really well and were easy to customize. Drawing on this tablet feels really nice. It has a noticeable texture on the screen. It doesn't feel glassy at all, and my hand can slide around easily. I personally found the texture on this tablet to be a little too strong, but this is a personal preference. Plus, the texture on screens usually does wear down with time and use, so it can be nice for them to start off a little bit strong because they will wear down. The tablet worked very nicely and was very responsive with the pen. I worked with it for this entire video and I enjoyed my time with it. I give the PD156PRO 5 out of 5 stars. Now let's draw the last pose. This last pose is a sitting pose. As usual, I start with the head. This guy is really slouching and I wanted to try to express that. His head is kind of coming forwards, so the neck is kind of going like this. I make it go into the diamond-like shape that represents the trap muscle. I draw his line of action for the torso really bending, and then I draw that ribcage shape that I was talking about earlier. When drawing a torso that is bending, it can help to remember pinch and stretch. So on the left where we can see the torso bending, it really pinches in, and then on the right side where we see the back, it's really stretching. I try to really emphasize the pinch and the stretch to help the pose feel like it's bending. I also used this in the last pose. We can see that his torso is stretching on the left and pinching on the right. Like with the last pose, we are dealing with a bit of foreshortening from the right leg. When drawing legs in this kind of position, I first plan where I want the knee to go by drawing a circle, and then I try to attach that circle to the body. That's often how I go about trying to foreshorten things. Because the thigh is coming towards us, it looks kind of short and doesn't look very long. I want his legs to appear as if they are long, but we can't really tell with the first leg. So for the second leg, I'm going to draw it in a view that lets us better see the length of his legs. This makes our brain assume that the other leg is also long, even if it doesn't look like it because of the perspective. His left arm was a little tricky. The upper arm is kind of just going down, but the lower arm is coming towards us a little bit. A lot of times when drawing the arms, I'll draw a flat surface at the end of them to help me better understand where they are facing. I'll often do this for the upper arm if it's kind of coming towards us or away from us in any way, and I do the same for the lower arm. Next, I'll start roughing in his clothes. He is wearing a very baggy jacket, so I was really trying to think about the space in between his body and the fabric and how they are interacting. Like, because the jacket is loose, it doesn't really pinch in with his torso. If he was wearing a tighter shirt, it would pinch in with his torso. Now I'm doing my cleanup and adding a little bit of color. I had a lot of fun working on this video. It was nice to sit down and get to do some pose studies. I hope this video was a little bit helpful to you when it comes to drawing poses. If this is something you'd like to see me do again in the future with different poses, please let me know. Also, if you could give this video a thumbs up and share the video, I would really appreciate it so much. YouTube hasn't been promoting my videos as much recently for some reason, so sharing this video and giving it a thumbs up can really help. So here are the poses I drew in this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!